There's been a claim among, say, Western philosophers since, I really think, since the beginning of the philosophical tradition, that the basis of civilization itself, the structural basis, is roughly speaking the nuclear family. And another thing I think that's come under assault, and this is certainly something that was picked up by the Christian fundamentalists early, was that the dissolution of these category structures also begins to destabilize the nuclear family. And the problem with that is we don't exactly know what the consequences of that will be. We do know, the scientific literature is quite clear on this as far as I'm concerned. Children who are raised in intact families with two biological parents do far better on pretty much everything that's measured. And so now, of course, the problem with the family, and you can see this reflected in, say, Kathleen Wynne's new legislation on, I think it's called All Families Are Equal, that's the bill, is that if any arrangement whatsoever between people can be family, then there's no such thing as family anymore. And if there's no such thing as family, well, then we don't know what will happen. And the problem, too, is that it seems to me that it's in the interest of people who do not fit easily into categories to not destabilize the main culture too badly. And there's a reason for that, is the main culture right now is actually pretty tolerant. If you destabilize a culture enough, it will become rapidly intolerant. And then the first thing that happens is those who are identifiably different are the first targets of an intolerant culture. Anyways, it's a really fundamental problem. The categories exclude, but then if you include the excluded in the category, you blow the category structure. Now, this is partly why the right-wing Christians, for example, were so opposed to the idea of homosexual marriage, because they viewed marriage as a binary category between males and females, and they believed that including the excluded in that would blow the category. Now, you can argue that they were wrong, or you can argue that they were right, but at least you have to argue that they might be right, and that's what they were concerned about. There was an example of this that a researcher named Goldberg offered. He had trained a neural network to recognize images of fish, and the same neural network to recognize images of birds. But when he showed it a penguin, then it blew the category structure so that all fish became birds and all birds became fish. Now, the postmodernists like Derrida claimed that category structures were primarily tools of power and oppression, which to me is an absurd claim, because that's not their primary use, even though that may be one of their consequences and one of their occasional uses. And he became very, very concerned about who the category systems marginalized and what the consequence of that was for them. And that got tangled in a sense into the Marxist identity politics routine, because the Marxist identity politics people picked up the idea of the excluded and marginalized and sort of transformed them into the equivalent of Marx's oppressed working class, and then started to agitate for them.